So I had a dream that I was walking in the desert with a group of men. I was the only female with them, and I had a sense that we were lost, maybe, and we came across a large structure, like a building like this, and it had hieroglyphics all over it. But the men that I was with only spoke Arabic, and I spoke Arabic and ancient Egyptian, and I could read all the hieroglyphics and what they were saying. And I noticed that with the building there was an opening and then like a window up top. Just imagine like a stairway that leads in a spiral up top to a window, but the window was higher. The men were dressed like this that I was with, and I looked like this. I was very dark and slender, and I looked like rather more Egyptian. The man who spoke only Egyptian looked very similar to this, except I could even say that he was much darker than this. And basically, we were talking and we were saying how we were lost and we needed water, and that was pretty much the end of the dream about that portion. And I'm also gonna go into what a lot of the men looked like, because I seemed to be walking with a group of men who were not higher class but lower class, because there was a difference between the Egyptians and how they dressed and how they looked, and then how the lower class and the regular people who lived amongst basically they lived alongside with the Hebrew Israelites that were slaves, because the slaves had living quarters just as much, and then there was really, really poor Egyptians too as well that lived alongside them. So I'm gonna go into that about some of the things that I saw in my dreams about concerning the ancient Egyptians and stuff, and the Hebrew Israelites. This is a good representation of what some of the men look like that were poor class. Some of the women and their skin complexions that I saw, dark skin complexions. You see her hair, how it was braided. You see the hairstyles that you see are more of the common folks. Some of the Egyptians wore their real hair, but a lot of the regular Egyptians like this, like look, you see the similarities in hairstyles. Like, they tend to wear braids and very elaborate wigs and things like that, the richer Egyptians and stuff. But the common folk typically wore, their own hair, braids. The men usually cut their hair or wore hair to the side of their head. I noticed that. It was very much so like the hieroglyphics. And the skin tones varied. I mean, like, a lot of the pharaohs and stuff, they all stayed within their own bloodline, so the skin tone was pretty much the same. Like, they all had darker skin for the most part, or a reddish brown color. But once you started getting out towards the lower class Egyptians and the ancient Hebrew Israelites, you had some lighter skinned ones, you had Middle Eastern looking Hebrew Israelites, you had a whole bunch of different looking people. But sometimes you couldn't tell the difference between an Egyptian and the Hebrew Israelites from what I saw in my dream and stuff. And some of the Hebrew Israelites would actually work in the palace, because when I was observing, in one of my first dreams where I met one of the pharaohs, the Hebrew Israelites were definitely serving, and some of them had like a rather more Middle Eastern lighter skin complexion. Some of them had dark complexions that you couldn't tell the difference. And they would dress a lot differently than the Egyptians and Hebrew Israelites that were poor. Like, the ones that were poor would wear longer looking shirts and dress. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, they just didn't dress like, they didn't have like the skirt looking things that you see that the men would wear in the movies and stuff. They didn't have all that. They had rags and stuff. Seriously. So, yeah, it was a lot. It's a lot different than what you think. And I did not see, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't see any white people I think I was back during the time, way back, when ancient Kemet was like all black folks. like all black folks. But it was far enough to where, but the Hebrew Israelites were definitely in the land during my dream, so it couldn't have been that far back. You know what I'm saying? It couldn't have been that far back. but it was far enough to where I didn't really see any Greeks there. I didn't see any of that. I just saw a whole bunch of people of color, honestly, different hair textures. But I noticed that a lot of Egyptians had like really nice hair, like really nice hair. The ones who didn't shave their heads had really nice hair, or really nice looking wigs, one of the two, because they wore wigs too. So it was really hard to tell. And yeah, I hope this actually shows some insight onto what the true Egyptians and Hebrew Israelites kind of looked like during that time. You know what I'm saying? There wasn't really a lot of mixing going on at that time period. So, I mean, like, you can't really expect there to be huge differences in hair textures and skin tones and stuff. I don't even think the Arabs came into, I don't know, because the guys that I were with spoke Arabic, so they had to have been in the land, but I just couldn't tell much of a difference between them. I don't know. But I do know that they were speaking Arabic and I was speaking the ancient Egyptian. So it was really confusing. Like, dang, how long were the Arabs in the land, or did they start coming into ancient Kemet and mixing with the people? I don't know. I really don't care. This doesn't mean that black people are pro, or I'm not pro black by any means. I'm not pro anything. I'm just showing y'all what I saw. That's it. That's all I'm doing. Just showing you what I saw. And I didn't see any white people. I'm going to be straightforward with you. I didn't see any white people. I only saw Middle Eastern looking people and black people, like dark skinned people and middle skinned. And that's all I saw. I'm sorry, but that's it. That's the truth. I'm not going to lie to y'all. All right. That's it. Hey, I wanted to add one more thing that I noticed that a majority of the people were in pretty good shape, as far as like more the ancient Hebrew Israelites, the ones that were enslaved. They were in great shape, and they were fit, as well as the poor Egyptians. But when it came down to like the royalty and the people who worked in the temples and stuff, they were like the pharaoh. He was a little hefty, y'all. He was not a skinny guy. He wasn't fat, but he was, in my opinion, overweight for back in that time. You know what I'm saying? Like he had a pretty full face, in my opinion. He was not a skinny looking guy. He had a belly. And he was huge, by the way. He was like a giant, but he was not skinny. By no means. And and I know like they depict them as being thin and stuff. That's not, to me, they seem all kind of thick. The royal family at that time, they all seemed like they had meat on their bones. You know what I'm saying? They weren't fat for today's society, but in my opinion, they were pretty overweight for their time period. And I'm just saying, like, I'm just putting that out there. But some of the maids and stuff that definitely were pretty thin. I honestly, this dream was a long dream, and I got to see a lot in this dream. The one where I saw the pharaoh and he asked me if I was ancient Hebrew, if I was a Hebrew Israelite or an Egyptian. Before I even made it to the pharaoh, like the servants were showing me around, showing me the land, showing me different parts of the tent of the building and stuff. And I'm telling you, like, I'm not gonna lie, Egypt was beautiful. It was way more colorful than you think it was. Like, it was a lot more colorful and had all types of creative things. Like, I would say that the Egyptians were very eclectic, but they also used the Hebrew Israelites to draw a lot of the stuff. Like, it wasn't just the Egyptians doing a lot of the artwork and stuff. They made the Hebrew Israelites do a lot of work too. And I'm going to insert some hieroglyphs that point to that. And again, like, they used to wear rags and stuff, and the poor Egyptians used to wear rags too. They didn't really take care of people they didn't take care of the whole kingdom, in my opinion, of what I saw. Like, they only took care of royalty. They only took care of the families who had money and stuff. Like, they looked nice. They looked well fed. But when it came to, like, the poor areas, they would look kind of rough, man. It looked really rough. Like, it was beautiful, of course, but the people were just in as bad a shape as the Hebrew Israelites in slavery. Like, because I'm not saying that it was equal. I'm saying that it seemed like outside of the outskirts where they kept the Hebrew Israelites and stuff, and all the poor Egyptians seemed like they were living in the same state as them. So it was really interesting to see that. And yeah, I just wanted to add that in there, that not all the hieroglyphics are really telling you their real size. And some of them was a little thick. I'm just saying, they was a little thick, overweight for their time. What else? I'm trying to remember anything else that I left out. The hairstyles, I said I went over the hairstyles. They were very African and it's in the way they looked. They did wear the makeup that you see them wearing. They did wear the makeup. Even the men, they wore makeup. Not the people, not the poor Egyptians for the most part. Mostly just the ones who had money and could buy it and make it. Does that make any sense? What else? What else did I see? They had dancers. They had artists. They had... what else did I notice? I already told y'all how big and super tall and big the royal family was. But the regular people weren't that big at all. They were normal sized people. Some of them were really tall. And another thing, I would say if I could equate what ancient Egyptians look like now, I would say they looked like Somalians. They looked like the Afar people from Africa. They looked like the Sudanese. They looked like a mixture of all of that together. But of course, with different families come different genetics. Wide noses, small noses, thick lips, thin lips. The Pharaoh had thin lips. He actually reminded me of my father. My father looks very dark. He has very high cheekbones. He has a very narrow nose, thin lips, a very strong face. And he has almond-shaped eyes. So he looks very interesting. And his hair is very loose, like a loose-looking hair, like how the ones I showed in the picture. So I have a very interesting-looking father. My mother, on the other hand, is light-skinned, light eyes, wavy, curly hair. She has a broad nose, though, like a broad nose, thin lips. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, each family has their own traits and stuff, and that goes the same for back then. Like I told you, like that Pharaoh, he looked very much like the Pharaoh from Prince of Egypt. Just a lot more African in his features, but I would say he did look a lot like my father, which was really weird. He did look a lot like my father, but he was not. But I can tell he's not my father. He just had very similar features, you know, with the nose and the lips and stuff. And I would say that the royal family tended to look more along the lines of. They reminded me kind of Ethiopian, maybe, like as far as like having those high cheek. Like, I don't know how to explain it, y'all, but it's really weird. They look very different, but they still looked African, I want to say. So, you know, I'm just putting that out there. I'm not trying to be racist. I'm not trying to be prejudiced. I'm not trying to be pro-black. I'm just telling you what I saw, how they looked, how they really looked. I feel like we've been lied to, probably. We've been lied to by a lot of the Eurocentric ideologies that have been put into our textbooks. A lot of the things that you think are so are not so. Like, you know, yeah, it's the truth. Like, the Egyptians didn't look how you think they looked. They looked black. They looked African, some of them. They looked some of them looked a little Middle Eastern to me. To me, they looked a little Middle Eastern, but I feel like that mixture was definitely. I definitely feel like the Middle Eastern, was it Arabians? I think the people who speak Arabic. I'm pretty sure they're Arabians, or I forgot which ones, but I don't believe at first they just came into the land and they mixed with the Egyptians, and that's why you have light skinned Egyptians. So and yeah, that's it.